All right, audio's on. Apologize for my tardiness. I left with just enough time to get here and hit every red light, and everyone's going about 10 miles an hour under, even though the roads aren't slick yet. So it's typical Illinois driver reaction. It's typical. I mean, yeah, that's my experience. Okay, it's anecdotal, but I'm sticking to that.
Here and safe.
Yeah, made it here. All right, the time being 9:05 a.m. November 21st, 2024. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Kane County's Public Service Committee. Clerk, please call roll for attendance.
Gums. Lewis.
It's here.
Sturgis.
Sturgis remote, if allowed.
Thank you. Tepe.
Tempe here.
Williams.
Williams here.
Young. Here. Sanchez.
Sanchez present. Remote attendance request, Mr. Sturgis. I believe that is it. Any objection to Mr. Sturgis participating? All right, you're in, Cliff. Approval of the minutes.
Thank you.
October 17, 2024. Need a motion to approve.
Tempe, yes, for unanimous consent.
FBS for unanimous consent. Any objection? Minutes are approved. Public comment, there are none that I am aware of. The finance report is on file. The recorder's report is on file. Treasurer collector, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Three statistics, important statistics on this month's report. Total property taxes due went up 6% for this past year. Second thing that I think the committee has been in our department, our office has been interested in is how much of the collection comes in e-check and ACH processing. That increased by 15%. And then finally, the percentage that we actually collect of what's billed out to taxpayers and then is collected is this year or last year it was 99.96%. And this year it was 1/100% better, so 99.97. So that's what I've got. Oh, one other thing that I did want to mention is, and I don't want to damage your reputation among your peers, Mr. Chairman, but I do want to thank you. You know, having Lawson compliment you on anything that could be dangerous. But I wanted to thank you for 2 years of very respectful, professional, and effective leadership of 2 years worth of public service meetings. I think that you secure our best effort from all people that you're responsible for when they feel trusted and appreciated. And I think that you've done that. And so I thank you and congratulate you on the good 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I appreciate that.
Second that motion.
It's been fun. Never know what the committee assignments are going to look like for the new term. So if I'm not here, I'll still be around. But we've had a lot of fun on this committee, I would say. We've made the best of it. I don't know, when Vern ran it, it wasn't as exciting, I feel like.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but he was always on time.
Okay, all right. I'm late once, and this is
I was concerned about you being late.
any
Suggesting Mr. Tepe knows how to drive in snow.
Yes.
this
Heavier
is true,
car.
factually, mathematically true.
Okay.
All right. Any questions or comments for the treasurer's office? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I appreciate that. Supervisor of Assessments, Mr. Armstrong.
Good morning, everyone. My report begins on page 70 of your packet. We are pretty much finished with getting assessment complaints in. I say only pretty much because under what's colloquially called the mailbox rule, if a complaint comes in postmarked by the final filing date and we haven't adjourned yet, we're still going to docket it and hear it. Our final filing date for the last township was November 1st. I would love to tell you that we are supremely confident that everything postmarked by November 1st is already in-house. However, that has not been my experience. In my returned mail analysis, which I'm still doing for all the notices we sent out, We still occasionally get one back. The oldest return mail analysis where we got one that said, sorry, this is undeliverable, came back 13 months later. I will draw a veil of silence over my opinion of the efficiency of those involved. But that's also because I have a correction in my report. On page 71, if you look at the headline of the assessment complaint dockets page, says from 2020 to 2042, that's 24, not 42. I like to think I'm good. I ain't that good. You can see that we had a 15% overall drop in assessment complaint dockets. A docket is a complaint that may include more than one parcel. They're typically one parcel per docket, but occasionally there's more than one. For instance, let's say some farmer in South Elgin decided to file an assessment complaint and his farm had multiple parcels. It'd come in as one docket, but it had multiple parcels. So looking at the parcel count, which is on the next page, page 72, you can see we had a 25% decline in a parcel count from last year. Now, if you go to the chart on page 73, we can see historically how that looks. Now, I'm going all the way back to 1998. That's when the data we have in hand, in-house, that we were able to collect to look at this. But the best place to start is with 2007. The reason 2007 is a good place to start is because when I arrived here in 2006, there was no filing, you couldn't even get a form on the website. You had to walk into the office, forms were not mailed out, and they couldn't be faxed because they were 4-part carbonless NCR forms. I mean, this was we were sharply in the 1980s by this point with our technology. In fact, one of my favorite stories, hearing all this talk in the news about government efficiency, is this one. It's 2006. I start the job. We have these 4-part carbonless forms. And I ask, what do we use those 4-part carbonless forms for? He goes, well, the first one is obviously we need one. Okay, that makes sense. Because I wanted to put it on the internet and they're saying we can't use 4-part carbonless forms. Okay, what do we use the second one for? Well, we give that back to the taxpayer. Well, is that how we notify the taxpayer of the hearing? Because that's written on. Oh, no, we send a separate mailing for that. So we're sending double the mailings for this. And the taxpayer can keep a copy if they want. Oh, yeah, but we get it to them anyway. Well, let's not do that. They already know what they wrote. I don't know. We don't need to give them a copy back. What's the third copy for? Well, that's the one we send to the township assessors. And I said, well, but we make photocopies for the Board of Review. Can't we just make one more and not have to have this and pay for these expensive forms to be done? Oh, that's okay. That's fine. I said, what's the fourth page for? Well, that page goes to the appraisal unit. And I said, we don't have an appraisal unit. Yeah, your predecessor disbanded it in 1993. So for 13 years, we were paying a 25% premium on these forms for something that we weren't even using. So 2006, that was the last year we used those. Next year, everything was on the web. Now you can see, because one of the things was, well, will we get as many complaints if we do that? Well, you can see we went from 812 complaint parcels in 2006 to 1,599 in 2007. That was the beginning of the financial crisis. So there's certainly some of that baked in there. But frankly, we made it easier to get access to justice. More on that in just a moment. So you can look at that and you can see the year after the yellow highlighted line, that's the year we're in, year 2 of the cycle. And you can see at the bottom, there's a summary for year 2. Our median change over this whole period was an increase of 40% and a mean change of 23% in year 2. But this year's change was a decline of 21% year over year. So in looking at all that, we're looking at some really good numbers here. There's a lot of confidence in the assessment system we're seeing. And the assessment complaint system is just for that, actual differences of opinion about value, not frustration with dealing with public officials overall. Lastly, I mentioned access to justice. next month on I think the 12th and 13th, I'm going to be in Chicago at the International Association of Assessing Officers Legal Seminar. I'm going to be presenting on a topic on access to justice. Kane County is one of the few counties that actually allows remote participation. Actually, that's the only way we do it because it becomes extremely efficient for everyone involved. And other counties require, for instance, a personal appearance, which means it's difficult for them to get attorneys who are actually experienced in property tax law and willing to go to that place. So for instance, if you're in Macon County, where my mother was raised, you would end up, if you couldn't find a local attorney, you'd have to call one from Chicago. They're probably not going to drive down to Decatur 3 hours, 3.5 hours each way for an attorney, but for a hearing. But if they don't, they'll get defaulted. We do everything online. We've sent out response surveys to attorneys, to assessors, all the participants. And they liked it so much. This was originally a COVID innovation. They liked it so much, we made it permanent. Almost everybody said, this is way easier than us grabbing stacks of papers and coming into the office. It makes us more efficient, makes it easier for everyone to do, and it provides for everyone access to justice. So happy to present that at the legal seminar at the International Association of Assessing Officers next month. If we meet in December, I'll let you know how it went. I'll be happy to answer any questions on my report.
Sounds good. It's nice to know the history of that office and how it's evolved and made it accessible. Any questions or comments for Mr. Armstrong?
Mr. Chairman Sturgis.
Sturgis, go ahead.
Hey, Mark, we have spoken, or I have asked questions over the past 4 or 5 months in reference to a couple of industrial users up at the north end here. And I just reached out to them this week with a statement that, you know, I think things have settled down and we're post-tax season, we're post-election season. Now would be the appropriate time for me to reach out to Mr. Armstrong and ask some of these questions that they have. I did reach out to Assessor Belak up in Dundee Township. I'd reach back to these industrial users. I will get you that email. Hopefully it makes some sense, but I'm hoping that this is an appropriate time. And for the committee, these folks are kind of looking for a comparison of, they're breaking down tax costs to a price per door in larger apartment complexes. And they just like to see some breakdowns showing, you know, from the south end of the county to the north end of the county with certain criteria. How, you know, is there a comparative or is it wildly different? I have stalled them off, and Mark, I'm hoping this is the appropriate time to maybe bring that in question.
We can certainly take a look at that. In getting price per door, if they are willing to give us the comps they would like us to take a look at, we'd be certainly happy to produce as much information as possible. The physical data about the property is maintained at the township level, not the county level. So it's not something I would have at my fingertips. The other thing is we want to make sure we were addressing differences in tax rates and levies. For instance, just moving from an incorporated area to an unincorporated area is going to mean there's no municipal levy, which means your tax cost is going to be different. Another thing I'd note is that cost per door is one measure of it, but from my experience appraising apartment buildings over the past 40 years, it's one that is almost never used by the market. The market will typically use an overall capitalization rate for a commercial apartment building.
Understood.
But if they're going to use other units of comparison, price per room and price per square foot should also be included. Maybe a gross income multiplier. I'm not a fan of the GIM simply because I don't think it adequately accounts for expense structures.
Mark, I appreciate that, and we'll take this offline, but I just wanted to make the committee aware of that conversation. And to my kudos, I really do have the smartest guy in the room working with us, and that's you. And I appreciate you so much. So thanks.
Thank you for the kind words.
All right. Anything else for Mr. Armstrong? Okay, thank you, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you.
Regional Office of Education. Ms. Del
Morning,
Santo.
everybody. How are you?
Good morning.
We both made it.
Yeah.
I made it just before you.
Oh, okay. Okay. See, I didn't know that. You just outed yourself.
I didn't
so.
have to confess, but I did. So I just wanted to announce, I'm sure some of you may have heard or read about it already, that Dr. Oliver from our office, the Assistant Regional Superintendent, will be retiring July 1. So we have gone through an extensive search process to find her successor, and we have found John Jonak, who is a Batavia resident, has been in education for 26 years, is currently the superintendent in Rosemont, and he will be joining us, taking Dr. Oliver's place July 1. Dr. Oliver will stay on for a period of time in a consultant role to make sure that John is up to speed on what she does right now. We're all very excited. In addition to his 26 years in education, he served 20 years in the military as well. So I think he's going to do good things and try to fill Dr. Oliver's shoes. They're pretty big.
Is she retiring just from Kane County or
No,
just?
from education.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, yep. She's hoping to be a grandma. She's got a wedding coming in March and she's already hoping.
Right.
But we'll see.
Well,
So
congratulations to her. I know she comes in sometimes, but
yes,
we'll have
yeah,
to.
I'm sure she'll be here
Yeah.
again.
Great.
So I brought Mr. Phil Morris, who I think most of you know, he's our Director of Operations and Tech, and he's going to talk a little bit about our front office to you today.
Thank you. So one of the things that,
Can you make sure your microphone's on?
is that one on?
Is it on?
I see a green light.
Sometimes you got to bring them close to you.
We'll get a little bit closer. Maybe I'll use the big voice.
Yeah.
There we go. Leslie, can you hear me? Rick?
Oh, please speak up. Guy closest to the speaker. Can you hear?
So our main office, that is kind of our public space. And in there, we take care of a lot of different things from fingerprinting to GED testing to Pearson testing, and just some quick numbers. This last year, we fingerprinted over 4,300 people coming in and out of the office and processed all their background checks, both state and FBI. And we continue to manage all that data so that when somebody switches districts or whatever, we can supply that information. For GED testing, there's been a big change in that, but we continue to have our same numbers. So we actually tested just about 685 people during this last year. And then our Pearson Testing Center, which is used for all kinds of electronic testing, from education certifications to, we have a lot of firemen coming through right now for certification, various tech company certifications. This last year, we did just over 1,500 people came through our office for those testing. So, and what's kind of fun is when we add in then our licensure piece, we are right now managing about a little over 10,000 teacher licenses in the county. So from the number of that, newly registered and whatever, the data is in our annual report. But the nice thing is when you talk about efficiency, we've been doing this with a total of 3.5 full-time staff that take care of all that public throughout the day. So we're pretty excited about that, to make sure we're staying efficient with our funds and maximizing the number of public we can serve.
Excellent. Any questions for the Regional Office of Education? Mr. Kenyon.
Mike Kenyon, recently, 301 sold a property last year. They bought that, they paid $40,000 an acre for it. They held it for 30 years and they sold it back for 20,000. You don't have to be a mathematician to see it's not good. And those people don't know enough to hire somebody to tell them, well, you can't build there because it's wet. So, and now they want to come out and ask their taxpayers to give them more money, and it's like, whoa. They need advice. I don't know if you can do that, but they need to be able to hire people to tell them. And of course, he does it. He moves away, and I'm the new guy, and I'm making him. And if I move away, somebody else has to clean up the mess. So just another task I want you to see if you could handle in your spare time.
We appreciate that. And I know you know that we are a local control district and the school boards make those decisions. So we are available and we work with them on building permits and things, but comes down to it's the local school board's
I understand
decision.
it, but
I
they
know
need-
you do.
They need help. And all the districts make mistakes. It's like, oh, why'd you buy that?
Yeah, is there anybody that the ROE is even connected with that would be somebody you could refer school districts to in this regard? I mean, it's kind of outside of your wheelhouse a little, isn't it?
And all of our districts have architects and they have experts in building and because we have 9 large unit school districts in Kane County. So they all have a plethora of resources that they can go to. Unfortunately, school boards get to make the final call.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and sometimes they do need some extra outside advice. But that's the way we're set up in Illinois. So I cannot go over a school board. I don't have,
Right.
nobody gave me that authority yet. If anybody wants to give it to me, let me know.
Opinion moves.
This is institutional knowledge, because I remember when they bought it from the Meyer family and the Meyer family bought it back. So how you sell your farm and make $20,000 an acre and keep it. That's pretty cool.
Just let somebody
Good
hang
man.
on to it for 20 years. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else for the ROE?
Just a comment
Debbie.
on that. District 301 has now had 3 failed referendums to do things. They're trying to build a new high school. They feel that the board in particular felt that was prudent, but they're looking at, I believe, a bond issue of 220 million in order to do that. That one just got defeated by a pretty wide margin. And they're actually operating out of a high school that's, I don't know, 30 years old or something of that nature. And that particular area is also growing extremely fast. So there's a real challenge in some of the school districts, 301 being one of them. And, you bring up a good point. I wish there was something they could help, but they need some help out there.
Yeah.
They need some help. Thanks.
All right. Anything else?
Mm.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Del Santo. All right. Next up, Veterans Assistance Commission, Mr. Zimmerman.
Good morning. Nothing too out of line in our report. I will note that new monetary awards for the fiscal year to our veterans on this report reflects 8.2 million. We actually just crossed over the 9 million mark. So to compare to last year, which was a record-setting year, we were at 7.07 million. So record amount of benefits brought in this fiscal year with some days still remaining there. Besides that, I want to talk about the Department of Labor's Higher Vet Platinum Medallion Award. We were a recipient of that award this year, which goes out to employers who hire and retain veterans. There's a gold level medallion and a platinum level medallion, and it's also divided by the size of the employer. There were 839 recipients nationwide. Our office was one of those, and Fermilab was the other one in Kane County. So if any of your employers or constituents want information on how their business can go about doing that, have them get in touch with me, and that application process, I believe, starts around February. And I just want to say thanks to the board. That wasn't just what we do in hiring veterans and finding those people to be in the office, but it also goes along with what we offer to those employees. So things like a tuition assistance program goes into that application and helped us attain that award. So thank you. And then finally, as with every presidential election, we're watching the presidential transition to see what the impacts on that might be for our veterans here. And the first strong signal we've seen in that regard is President Trump's intention to nominate Congressman Doug Collins as Secretary of the VA. Mr. Collins is a veteran of the Navy and the Air Force, has served in Iraq And he has supported many of the bipartisan legislation that's passed through recently, like the Mission Act and the PACT Act that has strongly benefited our veterans. So I hope that that's a good signal. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Veterans Assistance Commission? All right, thank you, Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you.
County Clerk, Mr. Pollock.
Good morning. After this election, I'd plan to be sitting on a beach somewhere and throw my phone into the ocean, but I mean, why not be here? I mean,
Here
this
you
is the
are.
place to be.
You could have phoned in.
Exactly. First, I do want to thank the board for their support. Or the clerk wants to thank the board for their support of the office and purchasing the new voting machines. It made the election much better. We had lots of positive comments from the public about the new voting machines. We visited all the early voting sites, and then we had lines out every day, and Clerk Cunningham would go out and talk to the voters, let them know what was going on, ask if they, if they'd used the old machines versus the new machines, and there's a lot of positive feedback on that. We prepared for Election Day. Obviously, the training, everything that goes into it with our judges, the going to the public to inform them about the new machines, the ways to vote. We had a lot of groups come to our office, people that had questions about machines, had some questions about how things worked. And when they came into the office and saw what we were doing, went on a tour, saw the judges there as the ballots were coming back and processing them. And a lot of those questions were answered. And so we always welcome people to come over because it's so much easier to understand what's going on when you actually see it happening and you see those election judges with the red and blue vests at every stand. And it really helps. So we appreciate when the public comes. But that was part of our prep. On Election Day, in addition to our normal crew, we had of our zone managers that rotate, we had a group of special inspectors that went to all the polling places. And then our partners in law enforcement in the state's attorney's office put together a program with the sheriff's office and local law enforcement. So we had law enforcement going around to polling places so that the judges had that touch of that sheriff's deputy or that police officer coming in. Are there any questions, any concerns? They felt safe knowing that we were prepared. There are always going to be certain things that happen on Election Day, but knowing that there was someone that was going to be there within 10 minutes if an incident happened. So we want to make sure that the voters felt comfortable and that our judges were too. Nothing's perfect. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. We're dealing with human beings, especially with 1,500 election judges that, most of them work 2 days a year. We train them, we do as much as we can, but there are human errors. We have candidates who are, it's stressful when you're campaigning for 18 months. Poll watchers, all the people that are advocating for those candidates. So, there are tempers flare, things happen, but we train our judges to deal with de-escalation techniques to be able to, try to calm things down and things went very well overall. The final canvas is up. If you haven't seen it, it's on the website. Just a quick comparison to 2020. 2020 was kind of an anomaly because of the pandemic, but overall, the percentage of voter turnout actually went up. We were at just under 74% in 2020, and we were over 74% in 2024. We had about 9,000 less votes cast, but there were more registered voters at that point in 2020. Early voting was almost identical. We set a record in 2020 with 100,001 early votes. We had 99,691 this year, so very close. You saw people from day one of early voting till the end coming, and it does help cut down on the lines on Election Day. The mail was the difference. We had about 85,000 vote by mail votes cast in 2020 versus 45,000. So that extra 40,000 people, those people showed up on Election Day, and that was really the difference. So, but overall, we had great turnout from Kane County. And a couple other things. It's not just elections, or it's not just that election in the office. We got the other two elections that we're prepping for because we're going to have a primary likely in Aurora for the mayor's race and then in Aurora Township. So we will have a February 25th consolidated primary and then the April consolidated election. It's a busy time in tax extension. We have redemptions after the tax sale. That's when we have lots of people coming in to redeem their properties. Passports will probably hit an all-time high sometime in November because we've broken the record each year. And so look forward to reporting on that. And then we're coming up on the tax levy filings for all those, every taxing body files their levies with us. On the financial front, 1.36 million, we're ahead of revenue projections. So that's extra money. We'll have our final numbers obviously at next month's meeting, but that's so far an additional 200-some thousand that'll be going back to the general fund that we've raised, that we're above expectations. And we hope to do that every year. So with that, any questions on the report?
Any questions for the clerk's office? Mr. Williams?
So I have a question on how the clerk's office reports the results of the judges' races, because particularly judges running for retention. Because I understand they need 60% of the votes cast in order to retain their office. But if someone gets to the judge's ballot to retain a specific judge and they don't know whether they should vote yes or no, a lot of times they just don't vote at all. They skip that. It's my understanding that a skip vote counts as a yes to retain that judge. Is that correct?
Look at the canvas and see.
And the reason I'm asking is when the election results are rolling in for the judge retention, it didn't look like two judges particularly were going to be retained. And then at the end of the night, or the next day rather, they had all the votes. They had far more of the votes than they needed. And I understand that is because of the way I think the statute reads. And I'm wondering if there's a way that can be captured because it's confusing for the public. And I'm sure it's confusing for the candidate as they're watching their race, not knowing whether or not, they've been elected or not. So not something we need to solve today or ever need to solve, I guess, but I'm just curious as to whether my understanding is correct and if there's maybe a better way to address that.
A good question. We'll take it to the clerk and we'll see. In terms of election day versus election night or afterwards, I don't know exactly percentages you're talking about. I mean, I know the 60 threshold, but I'm not sure in terms of the shift, but there were several thousand votes that of mail votes that came in that were postmarked prior to election day that were counted afterwards. So I don't know if that changed anything or if you're just talking about, how it was counted.
I think what I'm saying is when there's no vote cast at all, how is that counted? And I think that's a nuance to the judges' races.
Okay.
Just something that would be nice if we had more information on.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Tepe?
Yes, thank you. First off, kudos on the voting experience. I heard nothing but positive comments from people that went and voted. And, a changeover as massive as those machines, as well as the whole process, that's a lot to deal with. And I think your office in particular dealt with it extremely well. My second question is, if you have a primary just in, let's say, Aurora area, where will you have early voting available for something like that? Would you have early voting in Elgin in order to accommodate an Aurora primary?
As that'll be a decision made by the clerk once we find out, because there are still, there could be primaries that happen still based on whether candidates file or write-ins file or whatever. So we think that it's only a certain area, but we won't know until the ballot's certified. And those things come from the local election officials in those areas.
But it's highly likely that if it's only in Aurora, you would only have early voting in Aurora or a primary.
Aurora, I'm not sure if it'd be in the main office as well. In terms of
course.
in terms of you're probably not having 25 sites open for that primary.
Correct.
Yes. That hasn't been decided yet, but yes, that's likely not going to happen.
Thanks.
For April, yes, though.
Mr. Chair, Surges.
Surges, go ahead.
So Brian, I agree with most of the statements that everything went really smoothly with the new machines. However, I had several calls come to me, and I called Jack on them on election day, trying to figure out this goes to the undocumented migrant issues and citizenship. And I guess there was a couple of skirmishes, dust ups at election sites, and people, after the election are now trying to say, if we have a list of people who registered day of, how are those compared? What list are those being compared against to validate citizenship? And I had asked questions concerning, do they have to show their driver's license? What documentation do you need to prove citizenship? And I was told that, in days gone by, citizenship was on your driver's license, but the state of Illinois has removed that. And I'm just wondering, the checks and balance, and, I was led to believe that possibly, all you could do is try and take action to remove somebody afterward. It just seems like, if the computer can run that list and say, here's everybody that registered that day, then what are they comparing that list to confirm or validate citizenship? And is that being done? We can take this offline, absolutely. But I would like to kind of get my arms around this a little bit.
Sure, we can continue the conversation offline, but basically the election code that is passed by the General Assembly and signed into law by the governor, that's our guide. That's not our guide, it's our mandate. We have to follow what's in state, and then in there's certain situations, federal law. In Illinois, the requirements to register are the requirements to register, whether it's on election day through grace period registration, or it's any day prior to election day. So the same requirements are in effect on election day. So those election judges that are registering voters on the same day have to follow the same laws for the state and what they can ask and what they cannot ask. So those don't change. So, but we certainly can continue the conversation offline if you'd like.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
When you say what they can and what they cannot ask, what are an example or some examples of what they cannot ask? Are you saying they can't ask if somebody is a citizen?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
In my understanding is then when citizen or citizens get a driver's license, it doesn't automatically register them to vote. It's a completely different designation altogether. That driver's license couldn't be used to apply to vote in person.
there's different places to register, obviously.
Mhm.
If they're registering at a polling place on election day, election judges or if they come to the clerk's office, our staff is certainly more experienced in voter registration and dealing with those questions. But because of state law, people can register at other agencies, particularly the Secretary of State's office. And there was a memo put out by the Secretary of State's office saying that they have a firewall that is intended to stop non-citizens from registering to vote. Again, those things are done at a different agency and the information is given to us.
Yeah, I hear expressed, doubts in that system being secure, but I think, it's really not hard to do that at the technological level to separate and categorize, different classes of licenses. People aren't getting CDL licenses accidentally. So, yeah, just want to make sure that is the
Sure.
state's
And we
process.
understand we can do what we can do and train our judges, to train our staff in what the law says we can do. Unfortunately, we can't control what others are doing, but we can do our best.
Did the clerk's office receive many complaints or I forgot what the term is for when people want to report something that happened on election day that they think was not right?
We have a call center, we have a log of
Yeah.
things that happen. If there are issues that were legal complaints, those go to the state's attorney's hotline.
Mhm.
And I think they've published their things from their complaint line. I
Okay.
don't think there were that many.
Okay.
For us, most of the complaints that come in for us are, where do I go? Where do I vote? What do I do?
Yeah.
How do I register? Questions like that.
Okay. Any other questions for the clerk's office, Mr. Williams?
Mr. Young was first.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even see your hand.
David Young, so Cliff brought up something and I'd heard the similar thing. Do you know roughly how many people registered to vote on election day? Do you have an idea of what that is?
How many, the same day registrations?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was over 1,000. I think there've been a couple of FOIAs, so I think that information is being put together. So
Around
yeah,
it.
in the office.
You said around 1,000?
It may be higher. I don't.
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's a rough
Yeah.
number. I mean, okay.
Mr. Williams?
Well, that was my question. And then following up, what Cliff was saying, I'd be interested, I know they want to take it offline, but I'd be interested in knowing that information as well. So maybe if you could copy the committee, it would be appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for the clerk's office? All right, thank you, Mr. Pollack.
Thank you.
Other business, there's none that I'm aware of. No need for executive session. I need a motion of some type to place the reports on file.
Williams will ask for unanimous consent to place some reports on file.
Williams asks unanimous consent. Any objection? Hearing none, the reports are on file. Said it already earlier, but this may be my last meeting as the chairman of this committee, but it has been a fun run. It was supposed to be a quiet committee, give me a little bit less to do for my previous assignments. And right out of the gate, it was pretty hot and heavy. So I've had a lot of fun and we've all grown together and learned together through this. So I appreciate you all for being here and all the work that all the elected officials and department heads have done. And I know we're kind of a reporting committee to a large extent, so we're not involved in much of the work, but it has been an honor to take part in this and give approval when needed and to hear the stories of these departments and offices as we've gone along. So I'll still be around anyway, but I may not be in this seat next time. So thank you all for being cool. All right. And with that, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
Williams will move to adjourn.
Williams moves.
Second.
In honor of Mr.
Seconds.
Kenyon, I'd like to second that.
All those in favor say